A space best described as a park, a place filled with meaning. A platform floating in the middle. Below it, intricately tangled stems, and above it a wooden puppet with no owner. Only one, broken, lay there alone, filling the space as its uniqueness continued. Something very small, triggered, as if welcoming someone. Beyond the door, a change arrived. Naturally, he had no name. But for convenience, we will call him Alpha. Alpha looked around and first noticed something identical to himself. That caught his eye. It did not move at all, even when approached. And Alpha's curiosity did not end there. His gaze shifted to the paper in front. What was written on the paper he could not understand, but as if it were instinct, for some reason, he could read it. When he recited the spell, a resonance like a heartbeat spread out, and the moment he fully understood, he knew a change would come. To analyze the paper more closely, as he changed his posture, his curiosity flared up again, and his body naturally. In that moment, an indescribable satisfaction struck him. Analyzing, the paper was already no longer important, and the pieces that resembled him. For the first time in his life, he experienced happiness, and it was terrifying. After eating all the pieces, Alpha realized he could never go back to before. Only then did he look back to the paper. Ready for a new change? Alpha finished the spell perfectly. The stems below bore fruit again, and another life, Beta, was born. The first emotion Alpha felt was familiarity, a sense of sameness, as loneliness began to sprout within him. Seeing Beta with an empty stomach, Alpha, without hesitation, gave the remaining pieces. But unlike him, Beta had nothing imprinted. No morality. Great. Even the way he saw Alpha was more instinctive. With food presented in a given space, what would happen next was obvious. Alpha made a proposal. What are you talking about? Well, to roughly summarize, the two of them cooperate to ambush the newly born one and safely secure a food supply. It was quite a terrifying plan. Before he knew it, in Alpha's mind, prey and companions had begun to separate, clearly dividing the two groups and seeing them as different beings. The newly born one as well was no different from them. But that's how groups in society are not something so special. Simply because they shared the same intention first. They feel belonging and divide groups. It was their instinct. After successfully finishing the hunt, being full, they spent their idle time eating. As time passed and hunger returned, once again using the same method, they decided to call in not food, but a victim. Then Beta, who'd been watching, made a suggestion, just in case. To prepare for failure, they should have one more member. The new companion will be called Gamma. Alpha and Beta welcomed the new member, Gamma, by generously giving the privileges they had. While they took positions familiar with hunting, they asked Gamma to chant the spell and prepared for the ambush. However, just as human nature cannot be defined as one, Gamma, who knew nothing, and called a new companion from the moment of birth. Unlike Beta, who fully understood, this social system seemed to be deeply shocked. In this place, there was no distinction of good or evil, nor any fixed rules, yet Gamma, within boundaries, he said himself, judged their actions as clearly wrong. Power that lost its numerical advantage quickly lost strength. To compensate, those who flawlessly chanted the spell, the newly born beings also split into two groups. There were no screams of pain, nor bloodshed everywhere, but this silent battle was extremely fierce, and Beta, the most aggressive, eliminated those who disturbed his peace without hesitation, but in the end, he met the same fate. All those numerous lives had already vanished, and what remained from the fight were only Alpha and Gamma. Gamma, who insisted only on justice, without a real solution, could not stand against Alpha, who tried to maintain order and structure. In the end, all he could do was leave a final wound. Alpha, stained with victory and blood, leaving behind countless corpses, had only followed the most rational path, yet wondered why this happened. But only for a brief moment, because even then he was hungry. Feeding on the corpses of allies and enemies, he organized his thoughts alone. And the conclusion he reached did not change. Sacrifice others for myself. That was the unchanging law of this world. Eventually, when all food ran out, Alpha searched for the paper that had first created companions, though now he could only think of it as a food supply and device. Only then did Alpha understand his situation, but it was already too late. Because his tongue was cut, he could not properly chant, and the place, at once seemed peaceful, became a prison with no escape. Once again, a wooden doll left alone, without an owner. Now then, let me ask you, do you think this doll is really alpha? A place filled with silence. Through a very small trigger, on an empty land, a new life is born. Within a given space, they build a given society, where somehow its ending resembles a real large-scale society, an animated short film, L, a friend and an enemy, and a spell that provides new food in order to live a comfortable and stable life. Alpha, who actively made use of it, encountered Ganma, who opposed his will and his power was threatened. The fear of losing everything when things are going well is something that anyone who is human possesses. And in order to protect his power, he went to war, and in the end, the only one who survived was a single doll. But in fact, the doll that remained at the end, whether it was Alpha, Beta, or Ganma, we couldn't know. Because of the way it naturally seemed to chant this, I arbitrarily concluded that it was Alpha and wrote the script. But honestly, how could we distinguish it? But thinking about it that way, a new interpretation appeared, that in the end, the remaining doll might actually be Ganma. That kind of interpretation. Ganma believed that the actions of the others before were not right and tried to stop them. But that doesn't mean Ganma was a good being. That would be an easy question to answer. He too killed many of his own kind, and without presenting a fundamental solution to the system, he only raised his voice. And after making such impulsive decisions, the time he spent alone, while devouring the corpses of his kind, was probably enough time for a person to change their mind. Well, whether the final doll was Alpha or Ganma, you could keep listing interesting interpretations. But as humans who divide people and widen the gaps between each other, the ending where it leads to the extinction of a society doesn't feel very comforting. Thank you for watching.